6. There are a small number of people in the presentation room with me, and I suggest that we just very briefly go around the room. So I'm chairing the meeting. My name is Joanna Jenkins. I'm one of the lay members who sits on this committee. I have 3 other lay member colleagues, and
I'm Nadine Jones, and I'm Democratic Services Officer.
Steph Payne, Audit Manager, and I lead on internal audit and counter fraud.
Bwrdd a Noelwyn Daniel, Cyfarwyddwr Strategaeth a Gwasanaethu Corfforaethol, Director of Strategy and Corporate Services. Diolch.
Louise McAndrew, Corporate Strategic Planning and Governance Officer.
Bwrdd a Fiona Harris, Strategic Manager for Policy, Governance and Performance.
thank you. And I can see colleagues online who will obviously we will come to them as the meeting proceeds. Just to remind people, obviously, that this meeting is being recorded. It is, in fact, actually being live streamed. First of these meetings that I've attended when streaming has been live. Usual standard rules will not expect any fire alarm, and people will need to make sure that they identify themselves when they wish to ask a question. So please raise your hands, and mobile phones to be switched off. The next item on the agenda is the question of declarations of interest. I do not have any declaration to make, but if a colleague does, perhaps they could identify themselves now.
See no declarations, Jack.
Thank you. Obviously, if a declaration arises during the course of the meeting, please make sure the Democratic Services Officer is aware. Item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting. I will need a proposer and seconder for this. So this set of papers starts on page 5. Thank you. Anyone want to make any comments as far as accuracy? No, in which case, may I have a proposer and seconder for them?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Seconder, please.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Minutes have been approved. There we are. Minutes are approved. So we move on to the next item, which is the forward work programme. Currently shows only a small number of items on for our next meeting in March, but there are a large number of items to be programmed in. Does anyone want to raise any points? Councillor Clement Williams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Page 15. There's a list of things to go on to the forward work programme, and I would like to know when the first and the last items on the list will be programmed in. I'm keen to see that data as soon as possible. Yeah.
Thank you. The first item is one that sits with the Director of Finance, who's not with us at the moment. I don't know if there's any.
Yeah, in relation to that, I'll email the officer, and when I update the forward work programme, I can schedule that in then.
Thank you. And the last item is one for Steph, our internal auditor. Steph.
Thank you, Chair. The last item will be completed alongside the annual report for Governance and Audit Committee, so will form part of the next civic year calendar. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we should mention the fact that training is listed on this particular document. We were due to have a training course on the 1st of December. A decision was made to postpone that to allow for some Audit Wales papers to be considered and management responses. Obviously, that training will need to take place as soon as possible. I don't know if officers want to pick up on it.
I can certainly respond to that, Chair. So we will ensure that Governance Committee audit training does get programmed in within the 26-27 civic year. That will be done in a 2-prong approach. Our goal is to do an initial training session via Teams on roles and responsibilities, refresh, and key themes, key risk areas coming through. And then what we will do is reschedule the risk management update to an appropriate time. And the main reason with that training being deferred is what we didn't want to do is have that committee training session on risk management when we knew the approach was likely to change in the next few months. So committee will have a training session on that within 26-27.
Thank you. Thank you. I also note that to be programmed in is a meeting with the Standards Committee. I know that's a matter that Craig Griffiths will need to organise. I think it's now become urgent. It's been on the work programme for quite some time. And obviously liaison particularly between the two chairs is a key feature that's been identified in the past. So thank you. I know that there will be a timetable of members' seminars for councillors, which will be highlighted in May, and obviously lay members will need to be aware of those. So although technically it's not part of the forward work programme, it is part of the work of the Governance and Audit Committee. Thank you. Anybody got any points they want to raise in addition to that? No, in which case we move on to the next item. And this is an Audit Wales briefing note, which is going to be introduced by a colleague from Audit Wales, Alison Lewis, and then also the internal auditor is going to speak to the report as well.
Thank you, Chair. Alison Lewis, Audit Wales. The agenda item that you have in front of you today for consideration is an update and briefing on the National Fraud Initiative. The item contains the Audit Wales briefing note on the NFI for committee and also the Council's completed NFI self-appraisal checklist. I'll introduce the NFI briefing note and then I'll pass over to Steph Payne, who'll bring committee up to speed with progress that the Council is making in this area. So Appendix 1 to the report is an update on the NFI for the committee to note. The National Fraud Initiative is a UK-wide counter-fraud exercise conducted every 2 years. Its aim is to help prevent and detect fraud by electronically sharing and matching data sets across the public sector organisations. The 24-25 NFI exercise is now well underway, with participants actively reviewing their data matches. So the briefing notes provides a national level update on the current exercise, the local data for your organisation on the number of matches received, and information about an upcoming assessment of your NFI governance and follow-up arrangements. Over the coming months, my colleagues will be conducting a high-level assessment of your organisation's NFI governance and follow-up arrangements, which will be done in collaboration with your NFI key contact. The assessment will help us to better understand the factors influencing outcomes across the different bodies and explain variations in results, identify good practice and areas for improvement, and provide insights from the assessment which will contribute to our next national report, which was scheduled for publication in the autumn of 2026. So with that now, I'll pass over to Steph to give the committee a little more insight into where the Council is at with regard to its NFI work. Steph.
Thank you, Alison. Just to reaffirm, the Council fully supports the NFI exercise. As the key point of contact for the Audit Wales NFI review, what I have done is included in Appendix 2 our self-assessment checklist, and that's there to provide transparency on the submitted information and also regards our future target actions in the area. The big item coming through from the Audit Wales briefing note for me is the words encourage committee to seek further detail. Now, what I'd like to reaffirm is that NFI outcomes are currently reported through to committee, and that's delivered through the internal audit plan. So we currently have NFI resource allocations through the plan, and then when a data match group is completed, those outcomes then get reported through to committee. And a good example of that is in agenda item 9, regards blue badge data and VWP data. One area where I will look to improve that reporting through to committee this year, because NFI matching will continue through until year end. My goal is to complete an annual report on the outcomes for Neath, Talbot through our annual reporting approach. So please expect to see that report on the 26-27 forward work programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The words that you mentioned, which obviously are highlighted in Appendix 1, about encouraging the committee to seek further local detail from lead officers, was the key point that I picked up on as well. It's very good that it's going to form part of your report. But I suppose in a way I would like other officers within the authority to make sure that they have it uppermost in their minds, that they do, if there are any concerns, that they do actually highlight them for us, because telling us to be encouraged to seek further local details is one thing, but it's identifying what the issue is that we need to pick up on is a key point. So thank you. Councillor Clement Williams, your hand is raised.
Okay, so just to say, it would have been helpful if there'd been a pointer in the beginning of the report to say, if you don't understand what data sets are and what the NFI is, please see Appendix 1 and 2, because that would have. I did read the report. I'm very confused because I didn't really understand what it was about until I read Appendix 1 and 2, and then it all clicked, well, to an extent. And do we have a second question? Sorry, the first one's a point. The second one, do we have any money out of the allocation that has been provided for NFI by the Welsh Government? I'm assuming to the Audit Office. If the council actually gets any money out of that to pay for officer time, because officer time, as we know, is money. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you for the two queries. The first query, thank you for your feedback on the covering report. That sits with me. My initial goal was to make things concise to try and avoid duplication, but completely welcome that feedback and we'll take it on board for future reports. About the second query about funding and or income coming through. So at the moment, the resource for National Fraud Initiative, that sits within the internal audit plan and our audit plan days, and is also supported by wider services inputting through on any query areas or any match review concerns that come through. While we don't have additional funding that comes through on top of that, what that match review can action is identifying error areas and or fraud risk areas where income recovery can occur and or control improvements and efficiencies can occur. So, for example, there's been reports to committee this year on duplicate creditor invoice payments where that data matching has actually prompted recovery and that income has come back through to the council and balance the books. Does that help that query?
Thank you. Any other questions from any other colleagues? No? In which case, the next item is the Audit Wales review of corporate risk management arrangements in for Talbot. Oh, sorry. The report we've just considered is for information and therefore is formally noted. Thank you. As I said, agenda item 6 is the review of corporate risk management arrangements in Neath for Talbot for September 2025. I should note that I was actually interviewed in respect of this almost 12 months ago now. It was in February 2025, seems a long time ago. Audit Wales officer, I believe, Alison Lewis, you're going to speak to this report to start with again.
Thank you, Chair. The agenda item that you have in front of you today for your consideration is our review of the Council's corporate risk management arrangements. I will take members through the key findings and the recommendations in our report. I'll then pass over to Karen Furlow, who'll take the Council through the management response form to let committee know what the Council is doing in response to those recommendations made. With the Chair's approval, after we've both spoken, we'll be happy to take any questions from the committee. So our review looked at whether the Council's corporate risk management arrangements were supporting the delivery of its strategic objectives. We found a number of positives, including that the Council is taking steps and action to strengthen its culture around risk management and was reviewing its arrangements at the time of our review. However, we did find a number of areas where the Council could further strengthen its arrangements. These including ensuring an alignment between the corporate risk register and its strategic objectives, clearly articulating the risks and the comprehensiveness of reporting. We made 4 recommendations highlighting areas for improvement, and these covered issues related to risk identification, risk management, the monitoring and reporting of risks, as well as the Council's evaluation of its arrangements. The Council has completed a management response form, which you have in the papers before you. As part of our process, we review the Council's response form before it's presented to the Governance and Audit Committee. In doing so, we look at whether the response is sufficiently specific to give assurance that the audited body will take action rather than a vague commitment just to do something, whether there are clear and reasonable timescales where appropriate, and whether responsibility for activities has been allocated properly, so it is clear who is responsible for doing what at the audited body. In order to meet our obligations under the Code of Audit Practice, we are required to share these observations with the Governance and Audit Committee. I'm pleased to tell Committee that we reviewed the Council's management response form and are satisfied that the response sets out the Council's intended actions and reflects proper consideration of our audit findings and recommendations. Ultimately, however, the management response form is the Council's response, and it is for you as GAC members to be content with the response and whether it gives you adequate assurance. I'm aware through my meetings with the Council's key contacts for our performance audit work that there's been a lot of work taking place in recent months to strengthen the Council's risk management arrangements. So on that, I'll pass over to Karen, and she will take you through the management response form and the work that is underway. Karen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Thank you, Chair. So as Alison mentioned, officers completed the attached management response form that's included in your papers in Appendix 2. So that starts on page 65. So we populated that with actions in response to each of those recommendations. As Alison said, we shared a copy of that form with Audit Wales, who confirmed that having reviewed what we said we were going to do, they were satisfied that the response sets out the Council's intended actions and reflects proper consideration of their audit findings and recommendations. When we received the findings from Audit Wales, it was felt that it was a fair reflection of where we are at in terms of our risk management arrangements. And as Alison just said, and as the committee are aware from previous reports presented here, over the last year, a number of improvements have been made to strengthen our corporate risk management arrangements. So that's included risk and target scoring and the development of a risk appetite statement. So we do feel that coupled with the actions set out in the attached MRF, management response form, the work will contribute to placing the Council's risk management arrangements on a stronger footing going forward. Chair, if you and the committee are happy, I would like to provide an update on the progress made against each of the actions in the management response form. So I work through the form. It starts on page 65. So as Alison said, the recommendations, 4 recommendations, and they're grouped. So the first set of actions under the first recommendation relates to the identification of risks. So just to confirm, the strategic risk register has been updated to align with the Council's wellbeing objectives contained within the Council's corporate strategy, and the committee will see that when the next risk register comes through on the next update. Sessions have also been held with our heads of service to ensure that their business plan actions to deliver the Council's wellbeing objectives align to mitigating actions contained within the strategic risk register. With regard to 1.2, identifying opportunities as well as risks in the strategic risk register, research has been undertaken by officers, and early findings show that there are few councils actively including opportunities in their registers. However, further research and learning is planned, which includes engaging with other local authorities across South West Wales who received a similar recommendation from Audit Wales when the review was undertaken in their respective authorities. So 1.3, with regard to strengthening our horizon scanning process, a formal horizon scanning process has now been embedded since March 25, with reports being presented to the strategic leadership team on a regular basis. Going on to 1.4, so regarding ensuring a clear definition of risks, so it's clear what the risks are that the council is seeking to address and why. So at the time of the Audit Wales review, a section had been added to the register, providing the reason why each risk had been added, and work is underway with officers to ensure each risk is clearly defined in the register. 1.5, so the differentiation between risks and issues. This is an area of work where further research and learning is required now going forward in 2026. So there's more work to do around that action. 1.6, something that was mentioned earlier on with regards to provision of training on risk management to relevant officers and members. So training scheduled for Governance and Audit Committee, it's going to be rescheduled now for later this year. And training for officers will be rolled out as part of the implementation of the Council's new electronic risk management system, which is currently in test phase, and when the revised corporate risk management policy is developed. So those are the update on the actions under recommendation 1. Going on to recommendation 2, which was primarily around managing risks. So 2.1, with regard to developing arrangements to systematically assess the impact of risks. The Council's new electronic risk management system, which I just referred to, which is in test phase, will support analytics by enabling us to triangulate data from other data sources that are currently being developed. So alongside the risk management system, we're also developing a planning and performance monitoring system. So we'll be able to triangulate those different sets of data to be able to give an overview of how our risks might be, how our risks are helping us or not helping us meet the Council's wellbeing objectives.
Before you move off that point,
Yeah.
the triangulation of the various risks,
Mhm.
can you give an example or an example of what you're talking about?
So triangulation. So we later on in the update, I'll be mentioning our approach to performance monitoring. So we are developing a more holistic approach to monitoring the delivery of the corporate strategy. Mean by the holistic approach is, in the past, we would have just provided an update on how well we're doing on the actions against each wellbeing objective. We're expanding that to include other data sources. So we're including financial data. So we're including data where there's overspends or where there may be underspends in directorates, trying to link that to the delivery of the wellbeing objectives. With risks now, so a piece of work has been done to link each of the risks on the strategic risk register to the wellbeing objectives. So by having those two things in a system, we should be able to do more reporting about the impacts. So in addition to delivery against the wellbeing objectives, using updates on actions, looking at our risks, looking at financial information, looking at workforce data, looking at complaints and compliments data. And we're trying to have a more holistic view, a more transparent view of how we're delivering our corporate strategy.
Thank you. Makes total sense. Yeah.
Thank you. Going on to 2.2 under recommendation 2. So learning is underway to understand the link between the Council's risk appetite statement and tolerance levels. So we introduced our risk appetite statement last year, and also the rationale for the escalation and de-escalation of risks between the strategic risk register and directorate risk registers will be included in the Council's revised risk management policy. That will be documented in there. 2.4, so regarding demonstrating an understanding of the interrelationship between our risks and those held by our partners, research is underway to identify partner risk registers. So one that has been identified is one that's currently being developed by the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee, the CJC. So when that's in place, we will take a look at any interrelationships between those two risk registers. Moving on to recommendation 3, so that was around monitoring and reporting of risks. So with regard to ensuring actions to control risks are proportionately smart, during quarterly reviews at strategic leadership team of the risk register, there is a discussion on the smartness, like I say, smartness of the mitigating actions. So, for example, where available completion dates are included for the risks. So those discussions are ongoing. With regard to the costing of actions, research is underway via the WLGA All Wales Risk Network to find out how other councils cost their actions they include in their risk registers. So that work is underway and ongoing.
That sounds like a big bit of work, a very complicated bit of work. But
And you see what we find out from our colleagues. This 3.2, the update on this is just where I was talking about that holistic view. So with regard to providing members with an overall picture of risk management, performance and budget monitoring. So in January, we prepared a holistic performance report for Cabinet, which was very well received by Cabinet, and it also was presented to scrutiny. So that report, as I said earlier, provided members with an overview of progress against the Council's wellbeing objectives for the 6 months, April to September last year. But we incorporated those additional data sets in there, such as performance measures, strategic risks from our strategic risk register, budget information, and feedback from compliments and complaints, and feedback from external regulators. So, as I said earlier, by bringing these data sets together, members will be able to gain a more comprehensive view of progress against our wellbeing objectives. We are on a journey with it. It's a developing approach. So, when we do Q3 performance, that approach will be further progressed.
Is that a report that eventually will come to the Governance and Audit Committee, or is it?
It isn't on it isn't this performance. Yes. So finally, recommendation 4, that was reviewing our arrangements around risk management. So with regard to regularly evaluating and reporting on the economy, efficiency and effectiveness of our risk management arrangements, actions to address our recommendation will be incorporated into the process when we undertake our corporate self-assessment for 25-26, because our model when we undertake the corporate self-assessment is reviewing 8 core activity areas, one of which is risk management. So we think the actions to address that recommendation will sit nicely when we do our work on our corporate self-assessment, which comes to this committee because this committee has a role in reviewing the draft. So this committee will see it later this year. Regarding routinely sharing lessons learned to improve our risk management arrangements, officers regularly attend the WLGA's All Wales Risk Network, the most recent meeting being on the 12th of January, and it was there that officers arranged to meet to start to talk about how they identify opportunities. So that's where that piece of work has come from. And in addition, risk management has been added as a standing agenda item to our corporate governance group agenda to enable the sharing of lessons learned to inform improvements to our arrangements. So, Chair, good progress has been made and work is underway. But to summarise, so the areas that require continued work now going forward is the development of that revised corporate risk management policy, the implementation of our corporate risk management system, the work around the differentiation of risks and issues, the work on the costing of our actions that are in there, understanding the link between the Council's risk appetite statement and our tolerance levels, continue to work on looking at our partners' risk registers and the officer and member training. Thank you, Chair.
Lots of information, obviously lots of work still to be done.
Yeah.
When are you going to report back to the committee with regard to progress on the tasks you've set yourself?
When with the committee, perhaps the next meeting is at March, isn't it? Perhaps
6
months.
6 months. I think a 6-month update would be very welcome. It may be that after that we'd want it on an annual basis or quarterly, but within 6 months, certainly you'd have a better picture of progress.
Definitely with the corporate risk management system being implemented and seeing what benefits that bring in.
Yes, so that can be put onto the forward work programme, please. So lots of information. Councillor Richards, I can see your hand raised.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you for the update. As Karen said, I recognise the Council is on a journey in strengthening its risk management arrangements. And we've heard what actions have been taken and what's planned. I do think it would be helpful for the committee to understand how, and that's the important thing, is how these are being implemented in practice so we can be assured that they're being embedded effectively and not just documented. So, for example, there was a couple of things there around, you know, the alignment of risk to strategic objectives. And, you know, it's being updated to align risks with wellbeing objectives. But how is the Council ensuring this alignment is meaningful and embedded in decision making? And the same for things like the horizon scanning, you know. It lacked a formal approach to recording opportunities, but how will emerging opportunities and longer term risks be systematically captured and used in planning? You know, so that we're more proactive, not just reactive to these things. So yeah, it's a bit more about the how I think would be beneficial for us as members. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Very, very good comments, responses from officers.
Yeah, regarding your first point, thank you, Councillor Richards. So the linkages between the strategic risk register and our corporate strategy, so that's a piece of work that's been completed. It's not actually documented in the version that you've got in front of you today on the strategic risk register. So the committee will be able to gain assurance that that work has been completed and will be in the next version that you receive in just after May. Yeah, it'll be just May time. Into horizon scanning, another something you mentioned, Councillor Richards. So that is something that we embedded last March. So that's a regular report that gets presented to strategic leadership team. So it's a piece of work that's completed by one of our corporate policy officers and reviewing what's going on in Welsh Government, what's going on in the Senate and the various committees, what's going in key organisations. So just bringing to the attention of the strategic leadership team things that may be opportunities, things that may be risks coming over the horizon. So we're getting into the process of that information and having those discussions. Well, is there anything here that needs to go into the risk register? Is there anything that needs to be written into heads of service business plans? You mentioned it right at the start when you started asking your question. We are on a journey developing this different approach, and one of the key things is a cultural change, which does take time. Does that help?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just, using those examples. Yeah, it's just, with that, going back to that horizon scanning, it's the how will emerging opportunities, longer term risks be captured, used in planning, how are we going to do this effectively? Is it going to be, or somebody's been to a Welsh Government conference, and therefore, how is that going to be cascaded to senior officers so that they, that it can be used in planning, I guess, would be, like you said, we're on a journey. You're on a journey with this, but it's for me, I guess it's a little bit more of the how I feel would be a bit more beneficial. It would be helpful for us to understand how these are being implemented in practice, so that we can be assured that they're being embedded effectively, and as I said earlier, not just documented. It's not just we are doing this, but how are we doing this? How effective is it in our planning? Not we've just, not that I'm suggesting that you are, but we're not just ticking a box. I think that's where I'm coming from on this.
Thank you. Noel, when you want to come in?
Yeah, diolch, Cynghorydd Richards. I think it's, there's a significant progress being made over the last 12, 18 months with regards to our approach towards the strategic risk register. And I think that the dynamic has changed, certainly in the conversations we've been able to have with the strategic leadership team. You kind of mentioned the horizon scanning document. And we do often have conversations at the strategic leadership team, around those emerging issues, because people are in conversations, as you rightly say, at Welsh Government level, at UK Government level, and therefore that intelligence is feeding back into those conversations, and we don't wait until the strategic risk register is meant to come before us. If we feel that there are areas that we need to explore further, that does actually happen. I think in terms of demonstrating that we're putting some of this into practice, it is the way we've gone about strengthening our heads of service business plans. We're making sure that they are aware of their need to address and include within their business plans the mitigating actions that are put against the strategic risk register. So when those come, when the next iteration of business plans come before scrutiny members in the council towards the April-May time, you'll have an opportunity to scrutinise those business plans and make those kind of connections really between their business plans and what you're aware of as members of in terms of the strategic risk register. So you should be able to see the evidence here that we are beginning to actually cascade some of this thinking into behaviour. And ultimately, it's about ensuring that we are connected in terms of the strategic risk register, the corporate strategy, the business plan, and the holistic way we're reporting on performance. Yeah.
Thank you. Obviously, there's a lot of information that's just been discussed. Karen, did you want to come back with anything? So I don't know if any other colleague has any comments, or for that matter, whether Audit Wales wants to come back and say anything. Alison, do you want to follow up with any points?
No, I suppose just to say, you know, again, we welcome the positive way in which the council took our audit findings. They're using it. They were already starting that journey of improvement. They're using it now to embed future work that it's going to do. So, you know, we are assured in seeing how the council is responding to that in a mature way, to look at the opportunities it provides them to take their arrangements for risk management forward, so that they truly add value within the council rather than it just being something that they kind of have to undertake. It's about making it live, making it real, and making it drive improvement. So yeah, just sort of I suppose my thanks to the council for the way in which they have taken our findings. Some of it was quite hard, quite a lot of recommendations there, but I've dealt with that very quickly. And you know, we could already see, although we haven't come back into re-audit because it would be too early, but we could already see progress being taken, and I think committee will see that over the months to come in terms of the standard of reporting you're going to get through with the new system. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm fairly sure the question of reporting is something we're going to touch on later in the meeting. But thank you, everybody. So if there are no other comments to be made, which there aren't, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 7, the strategic risk register monitoring Q2, July to September 2025 set of papers. And Louise, I believe you're going to speak to these.
So thank you, Chair. So this is obviously the strategic risk register, which is brought to you every 6 months as part of our arrangements. The document in the executive summary, there are some key points to note. It's some of the key developments that we've made since you last seen the strategic risk register on the 15th of July last year. So just to make you aware that we have amalgamated 2 risks, which was SR14, inward investment, and SR18, which was the Talbot transition work. These have come together under SR28, which is more focused on the local economy and the opportunities to progress a sustainable economy for the future. The second point to note is mitigating actions around school assets and budget deficits within the schools. They have been added as mitigating actions into SR01 around council infrastructure, and SR06, which is around financial sustainability. So we're just waiting for further comments on each one of those from our Education Directorate, and they will be brought forward in 6 months' time then. Another point to note is the adjustments to the risk appetite for coal tips quarries, SR03, and decarbonisation, SR24. This adjustment has been made, taking the risk appetite open. Obviously, we would have a far more cautious approach to both of these risks. But obviously, as is noted there are funding constraints which is preventing this then. So that decision was taken when this was reviewed by our strategic leadership team. And lastly then, as we noted in the previous item, the ongoing work to clarify and strengthen our mitigation as a result of the recommendations from Audit Wales. So I'm happy to take any questions on the strategic risk register.
Thank you. One point I had picked up on, there was a report in the press fairly recently about closing deficits as far as education is concerned. I'm just wondering where exactly is that captured in this set of papers? I know education deficits you mentioned briefly in passing, but no, when do you want to?
Yes, so clearly you would have seen from the press reports, we are currently out of consultation on the budget and council tax proposed increase. That consultation will culminate shortly. and then there'll be a report going before council. I think it's early March to agree the council's budget for 26-27. One of the recognitions they're drawing attention to, Chair, is the investment into our schools that will really address and start address that schools deficit. So, that hasn't been yet approved, and then if and when it is, that will get reflected within the risk register, because it is in there with regards to potential mitigating action.
There we are. Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, I suspect that you may have some comments or questions for officers. I can see Andrew Bagley. Thank you, Andrew. And then Marco Inocchi.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So my first question, well, it's more a comment. I think the paper does give us quite a good update on the corporate risks that the authority faces. I suppose what might be worth consideration for future papers, there's a couple of risk scores that have gone up, but I couldn't see from the papers as to why that risk score had gone up, and in some areas quite considerably. And I think it's quite important the committee understands the reasons for that change in score movement. But then more generally, I think the owner's comments give a direction of travel, but they don't necessarily have end dates. I suppose I'm trying to look for the assurances that some of those actions are going to make a difference and mitigate the overall risk score going forward.
Very valid points. Thank you. Officers, respond.
I'm happy to take, if I take your first question, Andrew, in relation to scores, this is something we can note. Obviously, we do note on the pages where the scores has changed, but we can definitely add that in as to why those changes are being made. And obviously, those are reviewed within the strategic leadership team. As part of your second query around end dates, I think from the conversations we've had, it's felt that a lot of the mitigating actions are ongoing, which is why they're noted as ongoing in blue, because they are constantly going to be reviewed on a quarterly basis, as opposed to those that we've got in progress where there are definite end dates for. So that, this was the differentiation between those two columns, and that's something that in progress, you probably remember a few months back, we didn't have completion dates at all. So that's something that we've introduced, and that's something we're working with officers then to try to get completion dates so that we can give the committee more assurance around when that piece of work is likely to end. And then, obviously you will note it's being completed then. So that is a work in progress, but happy to take your points and to note for the next iteration.
Okay, thank you. I mean, with the ongoing ones, I think it just would be helpful if we had one key milestone that we can actually track against. I think ongoing, okay. Otherwise it just feels like there's work ongoing, but we don't know if it's going to make an impact or change the score, in which case I'd argue it's not necessarily a control that will address the risk. But if that can be taken forward into considerations, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We then have Mike, I think. No. Mark, sorry. You're all a very long way away.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's impossible to see. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Can you hear me? Yeah, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, specifically, yeah, to echo Andrew's points there. I think we've discussed in previous committees some of the risk scoring, and I think, yeah, we can see the work being done to try to give us more clarity. I think just generally, I would say, looking at some of the risk items in terms of mitigation plans, I'd probably encourage you to try to be a little bit more concise in some of the description of the key control levers you're pulling, or the 4 T's of risk management, if you're familiar with those, right? Otherwise we could speak offline, but fundamentally giving us comfort without reading what is kind of generally like an update on things happening, but it's not giving us clarity on completion date, as Andrew said. A number of the actions, progress ongoing, kind of doesn't give us the necessary steer where we are in terms of when that risk profile might look to move the right way. I think if I just bring it to life with one example, which is SR03, which is on page 95 of the papers, to do with the if there's no effective management system to address historical coal tips and quarries risk. So I've got a couple of observations on this one. So the first one is, if you look at the target risk score compared to the residual risk score, your impact rating has actually gone up. To get to your 10, you have to have an impact of 5, whereas on the previous graph on residual risk, your impact was 4. So again, I've just asked you to, it may be placed in the wrong box, so maybe you try to keep it in the impact column of 4. I think just a general comment is, if you are taking mitigating action, quite often you are able to reduce the extent of the impact as well. There are some risk practitioners who don't think you ever impact the impact, right? You can't affect positively the impact. In my opinion, you absolutely can. You know, if you think of cybersecurity, if we put in robust cybersecurity arrangements, you know, you may not be able to stop a nation state attacking you, but if your regulators can see you've done pretty much what is within your risk appetite to do, the fine that you get for not protecting your, you know, your customers' data, your stakeholder data, will be less than if you've got no controls. So absolutely, you can reduce impact by putting in strong mitigation. I think the main query I had on this one then, though, was your risk appetite comment. I struggle to understand how you've moved it to open, because whilst you may decide to change risk appetite at a point in time, fundamentally, risk appetite is essentially you assess what your inherent risk is, and you decide as a council, local authority, what risk you're prepared to accept. When you're talking about the risk to human life and communities, clearly your risk appetite is always going to be cautious, if not averse. I would say you should be risk averse. The fact you haven't had funding isn't a reason to move it to risk open. I don't think you quite understood what that means there. So it's just, again, one to think about, and I know there's going to be some risk management training, but in areas of kind of tech startups, you know, risky businesses, people will be risk open because they see the risk reward. In this business and this council, anything to do with health and safety, you know, whether it's educational provision, whatever it might be, you're never going to be risk open. You're always going to want to be certain that you're taking the right actions to manage your risk. So I think just drawing it to life with one example, because I think it's important to be clear that risk management, you know, what we get as a governance and audit committee enables us to see how we're, you know, thinking about risk and how we're managing risk on an ongoing basis. But hopefully that's clear. Thank you.
Any comments from officers?
Sure.
Yeah. There we are. They're nodding and saying useful, Mark. So so thank you for those comments. Councillor Richards, your hand was up previously, but it's no?
I think my questions have been answered. It was similar, the first one with Andrew, and then with Mark. I agree that you know, I noticed that for some of the risks, such as SR03, the coal tips, and SR24, the decarbonisation, the risk appetite is set to cautious, but the register records open due to the funding constraints, as Mark said. And it was just, what I was going to ask was, could you explain how these differences are being managed in practice? So, you know, for example, how does the strategic leadership team monitor and respond when resource limitations prevent the council from achieving its desired risk appetite, and how are mitigation actions adjusted to reflect this gap? So it was just around some examples of decisions or actions taken to address high risk areas where the appetite cannot currently be met, I guess.
Thank you. Would you comment?
Yeah, no, I think, thank you, Dr. Richard. I think Mark's comments previously were very valid around that conversation, you know, purely because the funds might not be there doesn't mean we change our risk appetite. You should retain that risk appetite and work around the fact that we don't yet have the funds in place to be as cautious or as we'd like to be. So I think that is definitely an area where we again need to strengthen that conversation and our thought processes around it. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, your hand is raised.
Yes, I was going to ask regarding coal tips and quarries, because I've actually got 7 tips in my ward that are high risk. So I'm wondering, is it funding for both the coal tips and decarbonisation, or is there more funding for coal tips than decarbonisation?
Valid question. The officers are indicating they will need to come back with information to the committee about that, but the question will be answered as soon as possible, Councillor. Very valid question.
Diolch.
Any further points on it, or is that okay? No. Any other questions? I know previously colleague Mike Spanner had raised some points. Mike, I don't know if they've been addressed. Nope. In which case, thank you very much, and thank you for the detailed information. Risk register conversations, I know, continue every 6 months on the basis of it's a learning process, I suppose. And how do you make something that's got to be technical and detailed, capable of being read? Not so bad if you've got a laptop, but colleagues, if you're trying to read them on smaller devices, it becomes impossible. So thank you. Item 8 is the annual governance statement. Oh, sorry, should have said that the previous report was for information and therefore needs to be noted. So it's duly noted. Item 8, annual governance statement, 6 monthly update on improvement actions for 2025-2026. Again, Louise, this is a report you're introducing.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. So this is us bringing back where we are against the improvement actions that were identified when we presented the AGS for 2024-2025. So these are from our heads of service and who've got responsibility for each of the improvement areas. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Clement Williams.
I'm dropping in and out as well, so I'm turning my camera off unless I'm speaking, if that's okay. Yes. Just to let you know, I don't know if you've seen the chat, but Mike is dropping in and out as well, and he's listening to the part he can, so he may, I don't know if he can hear you at the moment, but it was him typing the question that he had to the chat. Anyway, that's a side issue. You touched on my comment around the tables, very, very wordy tables for, hard going, hard to read. You're not in the audit world. My colleagues, I think some of them were nodding when I mentioned this in previous as well. I mean, you can expand the text on an iPad. We need to do it on the iPad, but to lose part of it, you've got to keep moving the screen back and forth. The font is very, very small. But as to writing plain English, I don't know whether ChatGPT or something like that would help, but I find it complicated to understand the reports because they're too wordy, and I know you've got to get a balance between what's necessary and what isn't. I don't know what you're going to do with that, to be honest, because that was just my point. I found it hard work.
Thank you. I mean, certainly I've been looking at it on a laptop, and the paperwork, around page 119, for example, the font is quite small. It is very difficult, I know, for you to provide it in a way that is going to be digestible, for want of a better way of putting it. I don't know if officers have got any comments.
Thank you, Councillor. What we can do, as approach we've adopted with other reports, is we've put an executive summary at the front. So what we could do is we could prepare, going forward, taking on your comments, we could try it for the next update, is provide a summary at the front Still with this, we could still have this data sitting in an appendix for those who would like to read the wider information. But what we can do is we can put a summary at the front, summarising the information in the table if the committee would find that helpful. We have adopted that approach with other annual reports. So we could do that for the next one.
Thank you. I certainly think it would be worthwhile. Councillor?
I think that would be very helpful, to be fair. I think that's an excellent idea. And I can see my colleagues nodding their heads as well. Thanks for that. I just got kicked out again. So if you don't mind, I'm going to leave my camera off. Because I missed the very beginning of that answer from you, sir. But I don't need any response to that. Just to let you know, I have to keep my camera off, I think.
Thank you, Councillor. I think other people are experiencing difficulties today. I mean, the reality is some of the text, if it was actually put into a report instead of side by side, but with Arial 12 as a font, for example, it would add pages and pages and pages to the document. It's about trying to make sure that we get all the information so we can be suitably assured, but in a way that is capable of actually being digested and read. So we've got Andrew Bagley, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, it is building on what we've just been talking about in terms of the format and presentation information. I suppose myself being auditor, I quite like the detail at the back, but I think the upfront cover summary paper is really, really helpful also. But I do take into context the upfront covering paper does talk about the improvement actions and some of the achievements. I think for me, it'd be useful to try to draw out if there are any risks or concerns that we as a committee should be made aware of. It's very positive, which might be good news. But I suppose I just pop the question, are there any risks or concerns that we should be aware of and factoring in to the work programme in the context of the governance statement?
Because certainly at the introductory paper talks about risk management at item 4, and it just says, which is a statement of fact, risk management is a key component of the council's corporate governance arrangements, which is something we know and know about at every time, but it doesn't actually cover, what the risks are. So your point is extremely well made. Thank you. So, any other colleagues want to mention anything? If not, this report is for monitoring, and therefore we note the contents. And the next item is the internal audit update report 2025-2026, and this is a report to be introduced by our internal auditor, Steph.
Thank you, Chair. This is the third report in regard to the 25-26 internal audit plan, and the information within it contains outcomes from the period October to December 2025. It reflects the plan position as at December 25, and we've also got 2 limited assurance management updates in the pack. It is a large report, I do understand that. We've got 16 activity reports. We've confirmed that the Mayor's charity accounts have been certified, and we have 6 post-audit reviews in there too. Specific to Appendix 2, please be aware that the original audit outcome was presented to committee back in October. Based on the timing of the activity report at October committee agreed for the management update to be presented in January, hence its inclusion within this pack. And to reaffirm, both Appendix 2 and Appendix 3 are in relation to limited assurance outcomes. So our current process and control means that written updates only are required of management. Management attendance would normally occur if we have a no assurance audit outcome. Before I hand back to Chair and open up to questions, with there being a bit of connectivity issue today, would you mind me going through Mike Spanner's queries that he sent through?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I can ensure that they are met. So Mike Spanner raised 2 queries on the internal audit update report, and I will go to the first one. So the first was in regard to page 132. We currently have a table in there which confirms the assurance outcomes position. as at this point, and the cumulative assurance outcome composition too. The query from Mike Spanner was, there's quite a few not applicable assurance opinions in there so far, and will this impact our ability to give an overarching head of internal audit opinion at year end? So my feedback is, based on our current work mix for 25-26, I do expect our not applicable assurance themes to come through at about a third of our audit outcomes. So based on where we're targeting to get to by year end, we'll have approximately 50 outcomes coming through, and a third will be a not applicable theme. Now, that's not saying there's no assurance allocated to those pieces of work at all. They could be grant certification outcomes where grant certification has been completed. They could be advisory pieces of work, or they could be the outcomes against the National Fraud Initiative where that's reported through, or special investigations. So we still have assurance coming through, but based on the type of assurance, we wouldn't allocate an assurance rating opinion to them. So while they are there, they do not prevent me from using the outcomes to then get that overarching year-end opinion. The second query that Mike raised is in relation to the outcomes reported in section 4 and the number of schools outcomes within there where issues with the unofficial fund had been noted by the audit. And Mike's query was, it's understood that those individual audit reports get presented to each school, but is there anything we do with the wider risk theme across all schools? So the response to that is we do a number of actions on that area. At year end, we do a consolidated schools report that highlights common risk themes from the year and improvement actions and/or control opportunities, and that gets circulated to all head teachers and the relevant directorate management team. We also regularly link with the finance team and the Bursa teams to flag common risk areas, because those services will be in regular contact with the schools. It ensures their awareness and prompting of specific parenting instruction guidelines and guidance. And the other approach that we apply is we regularly engage with the head teacher networks to flag things that are coming through our audits and where specific focus is needed. And the next engagement exercise is in April, where we'll be attending the primary school network. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other queries or comments from colleagues? None, which there aren't any. This is for monitoring, so therefore we note the contents of the report, and thank you, Sarah, for speaking to the document. Urgent items, I believe item 10, there are no urgent items at the moment, and therefore we move on to the second part of the meeting. Item 11 is access to meetings. I will need a proposer and seconder for us to move into private session when the recording will be stopped. Councillor Clement Williams, your hand is raised. I think you were. There we are. Thank you. We did get you. There was a bit of a glitch in the middle. Thank you for the proposal. I need a seconder, please.
Happy to second, Chair.
There we are. Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
So just to confirm now, we just stopped in the recording.